Okay, let's go. This is Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is Jay Brown. Welcome to you if you're new. Thanks to everyone for being here. I hope you're doing okay. I don't know about you, but this week went by fast. And last week, it might have caused a little bit of a stir if you were here. There will likely be some follow-up conversations. But not today. Today, we got other stuff going on. I'm in a very unusual moment with you here because I'm not in the attic. I would say every intro and outro that I have recorded for the last year and a half has been from the attic. I used to record them from the studio. If you've been around long enough, you might remember when I first got the studio 2.5 years ago. And I used to record the intros and outros in the studio, but just things shifted and I was just not here in the studio on Friday or Saturday nights when I record the intros, so I've been doing it in the attic. But I'm in the studio now. Maybe it sounds different. I can't tell. I don't know. I'm not in my normal setup, so I don't know if it's going to sound different. It probably does. But I'm in the studio because my days here are numbered. We have decided to let go of this studio space and move into a shared space right around the corner from my home. You see, this studio is a 25, sometimes 30-minute drive away. And I originally took this space because of its price and, just the drive came along with it, but it was so much more reasonably priced than all the other commercial properties out there. This artist studio space that I got. And it's a beautiful studio, but it's in a neighborhood that's not so great. And I was never able to get people to really come in person because I wasn't able to generate like a local audience. Only people who would drive from like where I was, like 25 minutes away to come here. So in any case, a whole bunch of shit went down with the landlord. I don't know, maybe you heard me talking about it not so long ago. And at the end of the year, they kind of did like a jack move. And so, we started looking and ultimately I think I found a better situation, a situation that fits the moment more. And I finally got something written. I wrote a new blog post that's about this. It's called Dawn of the Post-Pandemic Yoga Teacher. And I haven't written in the last 2 months, and that's very unusual. Those of you who know me know I have written my monthly blog religiously, but the last 2 months I really had trouble finding inspiration to write. January with the inauguration and all that stuff just sucked all the oxygen out of the room, and then February just so much was going on. I didn't want to force myself to write something because it's not going to be good. I got to feel the inspiration to write. And I finally managed to do it. I'm determined to get back on track with the monthly writing. So this new blog post is about this. It's about how things have changed and what that actually means in terms of yoga teachers and their relationship to yoga centers and what even makes sense right now in terms of there being a yoga center. So I encourage you to go read the blog, Dawn of the Post-Pandemic Yoga Teacher. It's on the website. And I just felt like I wanted to record at least one more intro, outro from the studio before I let it go. I'll record stuff from the new place, so we'll go there together, but I'm feeling a little bit nostalgic and a little bit of sadness just in terms of the turn of all the events that have happened, The space has served me well, but things have changed, and I think we really need to reevaluate what we're spending the money on, honestly. That's what it comes down to, I think. It's not about spaces anymore. It's about people. Just like we always say, it's not about the poses, it's about the people. Well, it's not about the spaces, it's about the people. And I go into that much more in the blog, so you can check that out. And also, it's totally relevant to today's conversation with Rachel Feinberg, because Rachel is someone I knew 14 years ago. This is the first time we talked in 14 years. Up until the pandemic, she was teaching at the Iyengar Institute in New York City, as well as her own classes in Brooklyn Heights. And connecting with her after all these years, after everything that's happened in the last year, really reaffirmed what it is to pursue yoga teaching as like a life direction or even like a profession, and what we're going to do in the face of the new reality that we're looking at. We also get into the Iyengar yoga method. Like, I picked her brain some on her experience of that method and like alignment, which I've sort of moved away from. So we got into some really cool stuff there too. In any case, it was just so rewarding to reconnect with Rachel, and I'm very glad that you're going to get to hear it today. Real quick before we do, let me take a quick moment to reach out to any of you who are running centers right now, or maybe you're thinking about opening something up. I know that it is happening in some places, and maybe you are not so happy with your studio management software. Maybe you're using MindBody Online still, or if you're thinking about starting with MindBody Online, then I really want to suggest that you look at KarmaSoft instead. KarmaSoft is the studio management software that I used when I ran a center. And if you are going to have a center, I think you want to have a software that works for you rather than against you. And KarmaSoft, I think, is a company that does that. Rudy Senegal, the owner, he's been on the show before. You can go back and listen to it and listen to him talk about the genesis of the company and how he chooses to run it. And I just think right now you need software companies or services that you can get on the phone and that will work with you and help you through this time. So I think you might do yourself a favor to check out KarmaSoft. Go to karmasoftonline.com. Also, this episode is brought to you in support by Podcast Premium subscribers. People like Nadine Walker and Erica Williams. Thank you, Nadine and Erica, and all the rest of the premium subscribers. If you listen to the show on the regular and you'd like to see it keep going on in the way that it has, becoming a Podcast Premium subscriber is the best way to support the show. And you also get full access to the archives, which is pretty extensive at this point. It's choose your rate, and you can cancel at any time. If you're not able to contribute anything right now, all you have to do is send us an email, and we will give you a free account. But if you are able to contribute something, it makes a huge difference, and we are so very appreciative. You can find out about becoming a Podcast Premium subscriber along with all of my other stuff, my live stream classes, the weekly teacher's call, the Yoga of Business course, which is still going on if you want to get in on that. And just to mention again, the new blog, Dawn of the Post-Pandemic Yoga Teacher. All of that can be found at jbrownyoga.com. Okay, I think that's going to be it. Like I said, I'm in the studio. It's late, and I think we'll leave it there. I will touch base with you on the other side. But let's go ahead and get to this. Let's listen to this conversation that I had with Rachel Feinberg. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Jay.
Oh my gosh. I
know, it's been a long time.
Oh my gosh. I was just looking. It's 14 years.
Wow.
14 years. And you know, I emailed this to you that, and just so you know, we're already recording. I don't know if you listen to the show at all. We're already recording, okay?
Okay, yes. I do sometimes listen to the show.
Okay, cool. Well, I got an email. I believe it was like from the Iyengar Institute, and your picture was in there. And I flashed back to 14 years ago to Brooklyn Heights at Yoga People. What was the owner's name? Wendy.
Yes.
Wendy, right?
Wendy.
Okay.
Yes.
And I remember standing in that practice room, and it was just before, like, I left to go, cause I opened the center in Williamsburg, and I remember you then, and there's just so few people that I see today that I remember from that far back. And I was like, Rachel,
yes.
What's Rachel been up to? And then I also have to say to you that in getting ready to talk to you today, I did like a Google search. And you really do have, I believe, the lightest digital footprint of anyone who's ever been on the show. In fact, so much so. In fact, so much so, it's actually impressive. It's impressive. There's literally one black and white photo of you, and then there's 2 videos that you made for the Iyengar Institute in 2018, and then there's like a LinkedIn account and a Facebook account that you haven't done anything on in 3 years. And that's I had to think, wow, was that like a conscious choice on your part, or did that just happen that way?
It's conscious. Yeah, it's conscious. I prefer not to have much of a footprint on the internet for a variety of reasons. But mostly I feel like when one does, you become an image. It's like an image of yourself. And I like to change. I don't like to stay the same person all the time. My views change. So yeah, and I prefer, at 14 years ago, it's not like a super long time ago, not 50 years, but it's significant in terms of technology. And I prefer the word of mouth method.
Wow. Well, we'll come back to that word of mouth method, because I am in complete agreement with you on that. I'm curious though, like, when did you come to that? Like, when I remember back 14 years ago, we did have the internet. It was a very different time in the internet, even just 14 years ago, than it is now. But was there something that stands out in your mind where you're like, you know what? Because that's the complete opposite direction of the current. You know what I mean? To choose, or did you delete a bunch of stuff, or like? No.
I haven't deleted anything. Yeah. I have a website that a student made for me maybe in 2007.
I know, but there's just a phone number. There's a phone number and an email address. That's all that the website is.
And it has not changed. You can see that it's outdated, that it was in the early 2000s. It has not changed. It really just hasn't been necessary for me. I don't advertise on the internet. That's not the way that students come to know about me. So it just hasn't been necessary. I suppose if that felt necessary for me to do, then I would have to rearrange and alter my thinking around it.
Do you spend time on the internet, even though it's not about promoting your yoga stuff? Like, do you go on the internet, or do you stay off? Are you like a person?
I don't use social media at all.
Yeah.
At all. I do have a Facebook account. I have thought of like I have a business. A student encouraged me to create a business Facebook account. I created it, but then I never did anything with it. And then my personal account, I haven't posted anything maybe since 2014 when I went to India. And I have been meaning to delete the account. It just doesn't bring me any joy to be on Facebook. Occasionally I hear from someone, that like from the past, I'm like, oh, that's cool that they were able to get in touch with me. But that is rare. And they can always look me up and see my email address and phone number on my website and contact me that way.
It's true. I mean, I think it's brilliant, and I admire it and commend you for having, that wherewithal, because there certainly was like a pressure. And I will say this though, because I did embrace a whole bunch of online stuff, And I actually moved doing online classes and things before the pandemic, several years before the pandemic. That's the only reason, like, why I'm doing reasonably okay through this whole thing so far, you know?
Yes.
So there's some advantages. There's some advantages to the internet too. It's not all bad, but
there are. I'm teaching online on Zoom because of the pandemic. And gosh, thank God for the internet.
Right.
In a pandemic, I didn't know what I was going to do. It hadn't even occurred to me that it would be possible to teach online. So it has been an incredible blessing in that way.
Well, let's go back though. So have you been teaching since 2007 when I remember seeing you all these years?
I have been teaching since 2004. I did the teacher training program at Yoga People. You remember they had a training program. Yes. I actually did the first part of the program, the first half, and then Wendy decided to cancel the program. And it wasn't transferable to anything, so I just went about my business. And then she started another program, and I was able to do that one. Like, she gave me a credit from the previous program.
Yes, I have a memory of us having some heart-to-heart conversations around that time.
Yes. Yes. I remember you saying distinctly that teacher training wasn't really necessary. That, like, if you said if you want to discuss philosophy, like, I'll meet you for coffee. You know, like, you don't have to pay me to sit down with you and formalize it.
I really said that. I'm so glad I said that back then.
Yeah.
I guess I had developed a lot of feelings about teacher trainings even back then. But then I went on to do a teacher training myself, I have to admit, although I tried to do it in a way that made sense to me.
Well, you can only resist what persists for so long. You know?
Ooh, that's scary, though, what you just said. You can only resist what persists. Oof.
Well, it's, you adapted, but in your own way. It's not like you're only doing teacher training programs.
No, and now I'm not doing them so much anymore. I mean, I do like what I would consider the same kind of work, but it's much more on like a mentorship basis, and it's not, you give me $3,000 and then I'll give you 200 hours of my time.
Yes. And I remember that being the approach that you wanted to take 14 years ago or more.
Wow. So, but you did go on. I remember actually when you started to get into Iyengar practice back then, you mentioned it to me and I was like, go. I was just excited for anybody who was like, I don't know, a generation behind me or whatever, who was equally passionate and excited about practice.
Yes. And I took many of your classes. I don't know if you remember, but myself and my husband, who may not have been my husband at the time, we took many, many of your classes. You were on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 6:30. Is that right?
That's correct.
Tuesdays and Thursdays at 6:30. So I went to as many of those classes as I could. And I do have fond memories of my time in your classes with you, but also with the students. You know, Yoga People was, I think, the only yoga studio in Brooklyn at that time.
Yes. And, you know, it was a real golden time in one regard. Like, there were some women who came to that class, like that Tuesday night class, that was like their regular thing.
Yes.
And over the years, I've still, like, they would make a field trip together. They would all get in a car together and drive to Williamsburg every once in a while to take my class after I left and opened the center. And Mary Hudson, shout out to her. I don't think she listens to this show. Maybe she does, but to this day, she still edits my blog every month. One of those women from that class, like many years ago, she was on my email list and she was an English teacher, literature teacher. And she said, you could really use a sub editor because like my grammar and spelling was really bad and stuff. And I started sending her it every month and then she makes corrections. And now she's known me for so many years. She like gives me like editorial suggestions and I basically take every one she gives me.
Wow.
But I still have a connection to those people, especially Mary, from that class, because I don't know, there was real like Sangha, there was real, I don't know, community feeling there.
There was something really special about that space because of the people who were in it. Mm-hmm. And it was a magical time for yoga. The teachers who passed through were, I don't know, there was like little gems.
And Wendy was so old school about everything, you know? Like Wendy had come into yoga in the early days with the cigar boxes, you know, and
yes,
she was so hands off. And there was like a kind of a pro to that. And then there was a lot of cons to that as well. but
yes,
because it wasn't very well organized or executed always, but it definitely had that, I don't know, that radical, loose, everybody's exploring feeling, you know?
Yes. Yes, it did. Remember the little dressing area? They were just curtains.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess we look back on it now and there's a lot of things that would have been heavily frowned upon, you know, but like, I don't know. I guess that freedom of thing I'm pointing to also left a lot of room for a lot of not great stuff.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. But there was a simplicity in it that was beautiful and it worked.
Yeah. I think it felt a little bit like kind of since we started talking about, you know, social media, like when Facebook first came out.
Yeah.
Like, I remember that there was like a certain kind of innocence to it or something of just like all my old high school friends, like, oh my God, Chris Ward, you know, or whatever, like, you know, like, oh my God, I can't remember. And there was like this real kind of sweet thing to it in a way.
Yeah.
And over time, you know, those algorithms changed and they figured out a way to monetize and it's not that now.
Right.
And I think in a similar manner at an earlier time in the trajectory of like the yoga world, there was like a sweeter time at the beginning before it got, I don't know, a little bit more. Am I just jaded or did it definitely changed though, didn't it?
It became big business.
Yeah.
It became, I mean, it's like bands, right?
Right.
I mean, the trajectory of some bands.
Right. And at that time, it
started out small and sweet, but it became big business all over the city.
That's right. And
competitive.
And being at Yoga People felt like we were part of a counterculture.
Yes.
It didn't feel like we were part of the mainstream. We were like the people who were into yoga, and that wasn't everybody.
Right. That's true. That's true. But I do remember there being like long lines.
Yes, by 2000,
into the studio.
By 2007, things were, that's what I mean. Like when I opened my place, that was a kind of at a real sort of, I don't know, peak of things. Although there was more time after that where things were still on an up trajectory. But I would say for me, because I opened the center around 2007, like the first 7 years to like 2014 was pretty much an upward trajectory. Like I didn't have any problem. I just put an A-frame sign out on Metropolitan Avenue because I had a storefront and I would have 100 new students every month.
Right.
That was all I had to do. You just put your little schedule cards out there. And
now there's such a saturation.
I know. Well, somewhere around, I would say 2014, I'm guessing somewhere in around there, maybe 2015, there was a big shift, you know? And Moto and Yoga Works and a bunch of like those scaled model places came in and there was a million small places too, you know, it wasn't just the big places. There was, like you said, a saturation and you wanted to have like basically when I opened it, like Yoga People too, Wendy probably did not have to pay that much for that space when she opened. You know,
I'm sure.
You know, there were like these little spaces and my space in Williamsburg didn't cost that much. And as time went on over the course of 10 years, it just goes up every year.
That's right.
But the yoga class prices can't go up every year.
No, they can't. It's really, unless you own a space, I don't know how a small studio can survive here.
Well, and not only did they not go up in price, they went down in price because there's all the Groupon shit and all that.
Yes.
They actually went down. Like, we got paid more back then than teachers get paid now. For sure.
Do you think so?
Kinda. I mean, I guess it depends on where you teach or what your situation is.
I don't know. I guess it depends on where you teach.
Yeah.
Maybe
I mean, I think...
did.
Well, it's not true for me so much now because I have kind of developed my own little platform or whatever. But back when I was teaching at centers where I just had, like, at those gigs at Yoga People, I taught it, like, I believe it was 4 or 5 centers. You know, we have one class or 2 classes at each place.
Yeah. You just run around the city all day. Up and down the subway stairs.
Well, are you still with that guy you were with in my class?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah, my husband.
I have a fond memory of the two of you and him, especially. You guys were great.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we got married right after September 11th, shortly thereafter.
Okay.
And we still live in Brooklyn Heights.
Really?
In the same building. I've been in the same building for 20 years.
Oh my gosh.
21 in June.
You are a holdout, aren't you, Rachel Feinberg?
I'm seriously old school.
Wow.
I'm more like Renaissance times.
You're older than old school.
Yeah, exactly. Like I would prefer to have a lantern than electricity and a computer.
Wow.
But here I am in modern New York City, and I do love it here.
Yeah.
And I've always known that I wanted to be here. Even as a small child, I knew that this was my place, that the moment I became an adult and I had a choice about where I would live, it would be here. And that's what I did. And I've been here ever since.
Well, I'm curious to hear about how things are there, but I want to take a little time first to pick your brain about the time in between. And I'm thinking back to when I do remember you, telling me you were getting into Iyengar yoga. And I saw one of your first teachers was Jenny Capular. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Because that name, she was kind of legendary around then, back then. I never practiced with her ever, but I knew so many people who did.
Yes.
Is she still around?
She's still around. She teaches out of her home. She stopped teaching at the Institute, I don't know, maybe in 2016, something like that. Not too many years ago. She just downsized, because she is older now, but very healthy and well. And so she teaches out of her own space.
And back then she was at the Institute?
She has always had her own space, I think, since, I don't know, at least the 70s.
So did you practice with her at her space or at the studio?
I didn't. At the Iyengar Institute is really where I studied with her for many years religiously. She had a couple of advanced classes, like level 3, level 4 classes. One was on Monday. I think it was restorative and pranayama, and then one on Friday afternoon. And it was always the same folks. And just being with Jenny, she's someone who is a great example of the work. Like that, just being around her, you feel better. And it's obvious that she actually practices yoga and that's what she's teaching. So she's a gem for sure. I miss her. I haven't had an opportunity to practice with her in a while.
Okay, so when you say the work, what does that mean to you?
That she has been practicing. She's a practitioner. When she's teaching, she's a teacher. But when she's not teaching, she's not a teacher. She's a yoga practitioner. And she spends a lot of time practicing. She's put in the effort.
And does that practice mean like asana practice? Or does it entail more?
I think that Jenny teaches yoga. I think she teaches yoga, but it's not that she talks about philosophy so much outwardly. It just exists within her. It like permeates everything that she does. So you get it. I got it through asana, but I don't really know how to describe it. It's just become a part of her.
Well, it's interesting because I do think that this is part of my recollection or my experience of a Iyengar practice at that time. I do think it evolved over the years. Maybe you could speak to that. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah.
But I know that back then there was another teacher. What was her name? Robin? Gosh, I can't remember the name.
Robin Janis?
Maybe. Yes, maybe Robin Janis. And she would teach out of her living room. And I went to.
Yeah.
Is that right? Is that?
It's possible. I don't want to say definitively, but it's possible.
I'm not sure that's the name. I think it's the name, but I went a couple of times to that class, and I remember, I don't know if it was me who asked the question, or someone else asked the question, and she was like very cool and really made it clear, like, I don't teach philosophy. I teach asana practice. And I thought that was very interesting. But I also know what you're saying, that we were just discussing this in a teacher's class I had last night, where people were asking what's changed in your teaching over the last year. And one of the teachers in that class was saying that one of the things that's changed is not that she's necessarily doing so much different stuff in her class, although there were some of that. It was that she's gone through so much herself personally in what's happened over this last year. She lost her father and all this different stuff. And that stuff, she brings that with her now into the classes. And that's what's changed. And she thinks she's a better yoga teacher because of that. Sure. And I was like, that's absolutely true. Like, a lot of what happens in a yoga practice isn't about like the cueing. There's like a shared, like, I just had Gil Headley on, and he talked about how when you're in the same room where you talk to someone, you share molecules.
Yes, I did listen to that.
Isn't that awesome? It's so cool.
Yeah.
And, but to me, like, there is, and sometimes people will call that like, transmission or whatever. And then that can be like, some people will call bullshit on that, but there's something to that. There's like a even nonverbal exchange that happens between people. If you spend time with someone who has a certain quality about them,
yes,
that they're modeling, then that becomes a learning to be around them.
Yeah. You can actually learn how to be, like how to exist.
Well,
but you can also on the other side learn how not to be.
Yeah. I
mean, teachers offer us both. So when I say how to be, I mean that I feel like Jenny, and I do feel a little strange about speaking specifically about Jenny, but I love her, and she is a clear point of reference for me, that she just she had clear boundaries, but was very warm and compassionate and patient with students. And so that's big. Combo of stability, like being stable and having healthy boundaries, but still being open and welcoming, that I think is something to aspire to, for sure.
Well, I have to say that even though I learned from the Iyengar practice that I didn't always find it to be very welcoming or warm.
I know.
It's feeling, you know. That was unusual. That's unusual, I would think.
Well, teachers are people, and I'm not starting off by trying to make excuses for people, but from my perspective, I think along the way, the method has been misinterpreted at times, and there have been teachers who have tried to be like BKS, which is a mistake, because that's not who they are. So I mean, I think that that's changed, although my experience is specific to New York City. I haven't been in many other parts of the country. I know what you're talking about in terms of sternness and scolding. I enjoyed some of that. For a
Okay,
time.
well, that's an admission. So what do you mean when you say that you enjoyed it? Because some people find that very traumatic, or they think that's
Well,
abusive.
I didn't have any traumatic experiences in Iyengar yoga. That's just me. But I come from a fine arts background. And when you study fine arts, I think that I got used to receiving criticism and not taking it personally, seeing it as an opportunity to further develop my art. And and maybe this is dysfunctional, what I'm about to say, but it's true for me, that there's even an aspect of like, well, if the teacher is criticizing me, they must see some potential in me. Because if they didn't, they would just say nothing. I would be invisible.
That's right. That was sort of the feeling, like if they didn't say anything, that meant you were doing it right. But if they spoke to you, then that meant there was like something for you to work on, or something they were going to...
I never felt like if they didn't say anything, I was doing it right. That wasn't my experience. It was more like if they said, I had a ballet teacher who would sometimes say, yeah, that wasn't bad. And I would think, yes. Like, that wasn't bad. That was about as good as it gets. So I'm maybe used to being starved of praise in that way from the fine arts. But, studying yoga, it's personal. It's not about praise. It's nice to know when you're on the right path, or so it seems, like you're moving in the right direction. I've had Iyengar teachers say that. That's moving in the right direction. So they're not saying, yes, you have it. Because Jay, and this is cliche, but it's true, as soon as you think you know something, you're done learning.
Yes, I hear that. But I also know that I had some stern teachers in my time, and I definitely benefited from the time that I learned from them. But I also developed patterns that they had, that I had to, the learning was undoing those patterns that I took on.
Yes.
So, it goes both ways. I mean, I have such mixed feelings about it, because it's a mixed bag as I guess life is.
Yes. Yeah.
I guess it's interesting though. I have spoken to several people on the show, Guisuk and Carrie Worko, other people, I think like you, who don't see the Iyengar method as a rigid thing that others sometimes present it as. And
I don't.
Yeah, that it's more of a exploratory thing. What did she call it? Alignment particularity, the somatic thing of alignment particularity.
I don't even know if it's that. I mean, I don't even know if it's that. There are so many different ways of doing things. That's what I've learned through the Iyengar method. There's no one right way. There's so many different ways, and we're trying to explore all of those different ways, or some of those different ways, and find out what they give us, what happens, for the purpose of developing greater self-awareness. So you might be asked to do something one way for a period of time, and then it's like, scratch that, do the opposite. Why are you doing it that way? We're doing it this way now. And then you have to kind of, your mind has to flip and go in a different direction. And for me, that's been really helpful. I feel like it's made me more psychologically versatile.
I've heard that, I've heard other people share a similar experience in terms of it making you psychologically more versatile. I guess my curiosity about that is, again, that runs different than I don't know what the standard idea is about it, or I don't know if it's a standard idea or a conventional idea that Iyengar yoga tended to be more about alignment than exploring different ways of doing things. So what's the connection between alignment and exploring different ways of doing? Are we exploring different ways of doing the same alignment, or does the alignment change too?
No, it can change. It can definitely change. I mean, it is yoga. I see it as a fine art. So if I relate it to studying dance, there is technique, and you learn that technique over years and years and years. But then once that technique becomes ingrained to the extent that it's part of you, you don't really have to think about it. You're not consciously doing it. Then you can branch off and explore in a variety of different directions. And that's where the creativity comes. But it does take time to get there, especially as a teacher.
I see. But that's an interesting thing, though, in terms of how much technique and what technique is required for someone to then be able to explore those different kinds of things in their practice.
I think it varies from person to person. This is nuanced.
It's true.
You know, there's a certain amount of black and white subject.
No, I wouldn't think so at all. But there's a certain amount of technique that someone would want to learn just to know how to do the forms and be safe in them, right?
Yes.
But then there's like the refinement of form, which I always think of Iyengar about. I think of, what was his name? That male teacher who I never went to, that Allison used to go to, that was pretty hardcore. He was super particular, microtonal alignment cues.
Wow.
What was his name? Oh gosh, I'm terrible with the names today. My brain is awash. Anyways, but there was certainly a lot of younger teachers, and it was about precise alignment.
I'm not arguing with you that doesn't or didn't exist or isn't still happening. I mean, precision is a big part of our method. I'm just saying that because of alignment and precision, my experience is that there's then a lot of freedom for creativity and exploring different range of motion. The shape of the pose, well, even that doesn't always stay the same, but that's the thing that we learn and teach first. The shape of the pose, the sense of direction in the pose, and then the actions come in after that. So I don't even know if in level 1 that's taught so much. It's more that, I mean, we were trying to get people to move and learn the shapes.
See, I think that's right. There's a certain level of just like a proprioception of someone being in their body that I think initially is being cultivated.
Yes.
I guess where I've diverged from the Iyengar method has to do with this idea of precision, that at some point I was someone who actually could do a fair amount of level 4 alignment with precision. And that alignment actually seemed to me to be, I don't know, kind of an exaggeration on my system and caused pain over time. And I
can see that.
And I had to let it change. And I realized that maybe having not studied the method as thoroughly as you or others, I wasn't there to see how the method would allow for my practice to change in those instances, you know. But
I think that's a key insight.
I'm conceding that.
Yeah.
But I will say that the idea of there being a precise alignment, or inherent in that is this idea of like one precise alignment and then different expressions of that. Or like people pulling out light on yoga and looking at the pictures and trying to make it like that.
Jay, those pictures are inspirational and aspirational. We're not trying to do it precisely like him. We're not him. It's just then we're just addressing the outer body.
Right.
What about all of the other layers of being?
Well, that's
so I think that ends up being misguided. That looking at the pictures and saying, "Oh, well, if I do it exactly like this, then I'm going to be a yoga master, or I'm going to find peace, or whatever it is." It's not. It's that's just the outward expression. And when you say that you were doing it, because I've heard you say this about triangle pose, that you did it exactly like BKS in the book.
No, I did it based on those principles of extension. So basically, you're creating like an extension through your spine and
what about
hinging at the hips. Okay, expansion or extension. But on one level, I was always forever being encouraged to lengthen my spine, and that the idea of a longer spine or some kind of lengthened spine was a better alignment. There was so much effort going into making that happen and holding my body that way that I don't know that that's true. Like nowadays, you know, that action in Trikonasana, which specifically we should say Uttita Trikonasana, which is extended triangle, right? Because there is just Trikonasana, not Uttita Trikonasana. What I'm specifically talking about is Uttita Trikonasana, which is we see in all the pictures. It's the beautiful triangle legs, and then your torso is coming straight out to the sides, and your one hand's on the floor, one hand's up, and you're looking up at your thumb, and it's beautiful, and we see it everywhere. But that position for a lot of people, not everybody, this is not true for everybody. You know, what's true for me is not true for everybody, but there's certainly a lot of people like me who doing that with their body over time definitely wreaked some havoc with like my SI joint. And now in my, you know, latter 40s, I don't put my body in that position anymore because it will definitely hurt if I do.
Well, I mean, for me, the question comes up like, how are you getting there to make that shape? So like you get there, but how are you getting there? And you had mentioned moments ago about I think you were questioning whether or not there was a precise alignment, like a perfect alignment that is the ideal. I don't think that that's the case. I mean, I'm taught to do triangle pose. I've been taught Uttita Trikonasana in a variety of different ways. Sometimes rolling the back hip down toward the floor and turning the back leg way in. Sometimes turning the back leg out more and rolling the top hip open. Sometimes firming the outer femur of the front leg and creating stability. Sometimes softening that and sliding the buttock of the front leg toward the back heel. I mean, it really depends on your circumstance. I think that's, for me, what's been so exciting about this method. I mean, the reason I came to it when I was teaching at Yoga People, I remember I taught a class where I taught Bakasana. And sometime after the class, I ran into a student who had been coming with his girlfriend. And he said that she injured her wrist doing that pose in my class. And instead of thinking, oh, well, she injured herself, I thought, gosh, I wish that there was something I could have said or done that would have helped her understand the pose in a way that would have prevented that injury. And that's what I realized, like, I don't really know what I'm doing.
Well, but wait a second, or maybe that's just not the right pose for that person. Like, why?
That could be. I don't know if she had a wrist problem or a shoulder problem. I don't know. But
here's what I say. This gets to the point. This is interesting. I hope you take this in the spirit of friendly debate, because I really appreciate this. Like, for me, the question is certain poses, like a crow pose or an Uttita Trikonasana even, I don't always know why we would need to be able to learn how to put our bodies into that shape. As Peter Blackaby put it on this show, he said, if you were teaching yoga to a horse, you would not teach that horse side splits, because the side splits doesn't help that horse in its life in any way. You might teach that horse how to run better or rest better, but a side splits doesn't serve that horse. And how much our hip needs to be able to do that, what he called a shearing action, which is debatable, but how much of that action we need to be able to do in order to have a functioning, healthy life is the question. Why do we ever need to be able to do Uttita Trikonasana in order to learn yoga and be well?
Well, I mean, I would say that there's a balance between mobility and stability. And if you're going past the point of stability to where you're creating hypermobility and going into an extreme range of motion that you can't support with your strength, that becomes injurious.
If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of Jay Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.